What's the most fucked up thing you saw at a sleepover? Story 1. Sleepover in friend's basement with 4 of us there. I think this was 4th grade. Sometime around midnight, the host friend's dad opened the door at the top of the basement stairs to ask if we wanted snacks. But right as the words started out of his mouth, he comes tumbling down the stairs and hit his head pretty hard. He didn't move for what felt like forever, and we heard from the top of the stairs some delirious yelling. My innocent self thought it was the host's mom, afraid because her husband just tripped and fell. My other friend later explained to me that no, the host mom was drunk off her ass and pushed the dad down the stairs. So yeah, I guess I witnessed a wife try to her husband. Story 2. My friend's older brother would get mad at her for small things. Went in his room, lost the TV remote, shut a door too loudly, and proceeded to beat the shit out of her, pull her hair and hold her down and punch her in the sides, literally throw her across the room. He was almost 10 years older than us and easily had 100 to 150 pounds on her. He would eventually tire from the beatings, leave the room, and she would go back to playing with me like nothing happened. I remember being so unbelievably shocked by it, but eventually became desensitized because of how normal it seemed to her and how unfazed she was by it. Reply 1. I was in the 4th grade when I slept over at a friend's house. It was me and 2 other girls. It was my first time sleeping over at someone else's house. I was always too scared to stay overnight anywhere, but her and I were close, and when I hung out at her house during the day, we always had a great time. Well, I'm not sure what happened, but we were eating popcorn and I spilled some kernels down my shirt. We all ran to the bathroom laughing and got the kernels out. Some ended up in the sink. When her older high school age brother found out, he proceeded to beat the out of her. Me and the other girls ran to her room and shut the door. All we heard was her screaming. I felt so guilty, I just wanted to disappear. She finally came into the room, red and covered in tears. We never talked about it again, and I didn't have another sleepover till high school. Story 3. When I was in elementary school, I got invited with my sister to a birthday party of one of her friends. Everything was going fine for most of the night, and then the catastrophe happened. Her mom came down to the basement and was very upset, but didn't explain why. She then had each of us line up on the stairs from the basement to the ground level of the house and brought us in one by one. I wasn't the first in line, but no one was telling us what happened once it was their turn. Finally, I was up, and her mom took me into the bathroom and showed me a trash can with poop in it. She was basically on the verge of tears, pointing to the trash can and asking me if it was my poop, but it wasn't. We never found out whose it was, or at least I wasn't told. We have joked that someone will finally come forward on their deathbed, but my sister and I have since lost contact with those girls, so we may never know. Reply 1. I did something similar when I was maybe 6 years old. Just a little bit of context. My dad worked late and my mom would go to bed early. This led to a quiet, dark, scary little house, which led to me and my twin brother sleeping in my mom's bed every night. One night I woke up, walked all the way around the bed to my mom's side, opened the top drawer of her nightstand and just peed in it. She woke up so startled and confused, which kinda broke my trace. The weird thing though was the feeling of sleepwalking, like going along for the ride and just watching what your body is going to do. But you don't even realize you had no control until after you're awake. In fact, sleepwalking almost got me on a cruise ship if it was not for my girlfriend being a light sleeper. Story 4. Not really f***ed up, but I was terrified one night I slept over at my friend's house. I wake up in the middle of the night because I felt sick. However, my friend wasn't in his bed, and both clocks were broken and stuck at some random time, like 1:38 a.m. or something. I was convinced that time had frozen and everyone disappeared. I remember crying and being too scared to go downstairs to check the microwave clock. Eventually, I went into his parents' room and woke up his parents. My friend was sleeping in his parents' bed too. Reply 1. I remember I was once wishing for time to stop, and all of a sudden I felt really weird in my shins. And when I looked up, my mom wasn't moving and I got super scared. Obviously, time didn't stop as she moved a few moments later. and there was background sound that I didn't realize was there. Story 5. The kid had a pea jar in his closet. It was a gallon pickle jar. If he had to do it in the middle of the night, he had to use the jar. Once his mom put us, in his room for the night, we weren't allowed to leave his room until she came to get us the next morning. How did they make sure of that? The doorknob was turned around backward, so they could lock us in. Okay, the jar was for emergency use only and was emptied and washed in the morning if he used it. Probably rarely used it, since most kids that age can hold it all night. He was a bad kid and stayed in trouble. Pretty sure the lock thing was to send him to his room and make sure he stayed there. Story 6. My best friend at the time had a birthday sleepover. Group of 9-year-olds, myself included. He also happened to invite a kid that was often bullied at school. No one in our group had any problems with him, and we just played as kids did. When it came to sleeping downstairs after a fun birthday party, around 2 a.m., the bullied kid started crying quietly to not wake anyone up. I, for some reason, was awake and asked him why he was crying. He began saying that he can't stand getting bullied anymore and wanted to take his own life. For my 9-year-old self at the time, who had no concept of suicide and taking their own life, I could only remember thinking, why would he want to die, lol? I got to a point where I started freaking out because he wouldn't stop crying. I called my best friend's father upstairs and he came down and calmed him down. The bullied kid's parents came to pick him up around 3 a.m. because he wouldn't stop crying. The poor parents didn't know their child had been struggling at school, immediately got him counseling, and his bullies were kicked out of the school after an investigation. From what I saw on social media last year, the kid graduated from university and is doing well. Looking back, I was incredibly sad and terrible that a 9-year-old was thinking about taking their own lives, and I am so glad that I called my best friend's dad's help upstairs instead of ignoring him. Story 7. I had a friend whose dad had a fish tank of piranhas. I really wanted to feed them a hot dog, but her dad told me they already ate. During the night, I snuck down to where the fish tank was, and there was picked clean fish bones in the tank. The dad was down there watching football and he spotted me and asked if I still wanted to feed the piranha. Being a small piranha-obsessed child, I nodded and produced a hot dog I saved from the barbecue dinner we had. It was the most terrifying and awesome thing I have ever saw. 10 out of 10 would never want to watch these 3 piranhas go at a hot dog ever again. Least not in person. Story 8. When I was 9 or 10, I spent the night at a friend's house. I knew his mom was pretty strict, but holy shit, did I find out how much. He did something really minor, like leave his socks in the living room, and she started shouting at him like he left a turd on the floor or something. Then he pissed her off again that night, and she wailed on his so hard that it scared me. She was a psycho the way she was spanking and shouting at him. I hated her guts after that night. Edit. I have no idea how this guy turned out. We moved away soon after, and Googling his common name is like looking for a John Smith. Also, another guy with the same name was murdered in the same town. It wasn't him. So it's buried pretty deep. Story 9. When I was about 15 years old, there was a couple in my cousin's congregation that offered to host a sleepover for some of the teen girls. I was staying with my cousin at the time, so I went with her to their house for the sleepover. When I got there, I realized that this couple only had one kid, and it was a little boy, maybe 6 or 7 years old. The couple set us 5 teenage girls up in the basement. It was furnished and carpeted, not a creepy basement. And the wife set out a bunch of snacks, and then we didn't see her or the little boy for the rest of the night. But the 30-something dad spent most of the evening with us, offering us sips of his Kahula drink and leaving the liquor cabinet doors open when he would announce that he was going to another room. I was creeped out, but I was so sheltered at the time that I didn't understand why exactly until years later. As an adult father, I think no one should allow himself to be in a weird situation with females. No one shouldn't even give one of your kids' friends a ride home unless someone else comes too. So many stories of guys being told on where the girl was lying can be found online without particular reason, I suppose. Story 10. I saw for the first time. We were watching movies on my friend's TV and fell asleep watching. Must have been on Cinemax or something, because when I woke up in the middle of the night, it was of a man and woman in the shower. That was really awkward since I was 13 and hadn't experienced anything like that. I was too scared to turn it off because her parents were up in another room and I didn't want them to know I was awake. So I pretended to be asleep. I eventually fell back to sleep, but it took forever. The worst was her parents fighting. They would yell, curse, hit each other, and were always drunk. What's the most fucked up is I stayed there so often that it became sort of normal to me. I didn't like it, but it wasn't something I could stop. I had so many weird and inappropriate conversations with her drunk mother. Conversations about me and my friend's life or about her problems. The worst was when he shoved her into a metal pole and it bent. I didn't see it happening, but that pole was like a twisted monument to the violence that regularly took place there. All the sleepovers there in my teens messed me up more than I thought. If I told my parents the whole truth about how bad it was, I don't think they would have let me sleep over. Story 11. It's nothing that I saw, but more like something that happened to me. I was 13 when I stayed over at a friend's house for the night. We were up pretty late playing video games and eating snacks. I got thirsty, so I and my friend went to the fridge to get a bottle of Coke. When I opened the bottle, the soda shot straight up my face and got all over my white shirt. I asked my friend if I could shower since I was pretty sticky from the soda. Once I got out of the shower, I noticed my friend and his little brother were knocked out on the living room sofas. By the way, I had no shirt on since the soda ruined mine completely. That's when their aunt came through the front door and saw me. She got close to me and started to rub her hands around my chest and shoulders. I was completely shocked and stayed still. Then my friend's brother woke up and saw what was going on. She stopped touching me right away and said she thought I was her nephew, then went straight to her room and never came out until I left the next morning. Even if I were her nephew, why the hell would she touch me like that? To this day, I wonder what would have happened if my friend's little brother hadn't woken up. Edit. The aunt moved away and my friend seems well adjusted and has a family of their own. I'm okay as well. That was the first and last sleepover at that place ever again. It can be stated that old people, especially above the 170 years or so, can behave weirdly towards kids. Who knows why is that the case? Maybe they have crazy fantasies or mental issues that make them behave inappropriately. However, we must take into account that they are usually bad with their senses and can think about someone as their own even if he or she isn't. Story 12. We had put up a tent in my buddy's backyard. There was a catwalk that his backyard had a gate to that went down between the houses and eventually came to a school field. It was late, we were chilling in the tent laughing and eating snacks when we heard voices coming down the path. There were shrubs along the fence line except for the gate area, so they couldn't see us, but we snuck out and hid in the bushes and were going to scare them when they walked past. But the closer they got, the older they sounded. One guy sounded really angry, so we decided to stay super quiet, let them pass, and go back to the tent. When they got past the house, the dude was pressuring the girl to give him a job right then and there. She didn't want to, but gave it after asking a couple of times. We had to sit there for like 10 minutes until he came and were terrified that if we made a sound, he would see us and kill us. We were probably around 12 years old. Scary stuff. Number 13. 5 of us at a friend's mom's house in high school, 17, 18 years old, woke up and there were 4 of us. One of the guys there was apparently in the mom's room the guy's mother. The worst part? Apparently it wasn't a new thing. The mom had been picking off her son's friends and fucking them to make her ex-husband jealous. Edit. No, I did not get a turn, but then again, I didn't make a pass at her. I don't think he knew his mom was doing it. Everyone was pretty cautious to not spill the beans to him until after graduation. When he did find out, he was more disappointed in his mother than pissed at his friends. Seems like a really weird family dynamic. Story 14. My best friend was sleeping over when we were about 11 or 12 years old, and we were hanging out in my room. Me on my bed and her on a mattress between my bed and the window. Out of absolute nowhere, we heard a bang, and my wall-length window totally shatters. Glass flies clean across the room, and we are both covered. We both start losing our damn minds and run out of the room, both of us covered in blood and cutting our feet up as we run. My dad flies into action mode and locks us in the pantry, grabs a kitchen knife, and runs into the backyard to look for anyone who may have been behind the window smashing. There was no one, so he calls the police and tends to our injuries. When the police arrive, they search my room for a cause and discover a huge solid ball bearing, presumably from a truck. It had landed less than 20 centimeters from where my friend's foot had been. If it had hit one of us, it could have us. There are no roads or anything near us, and my room faced the back fence. So to this day, we still have no clue where it came from or how it was traveling at such a speed. It cleared possibly multiple fences and smashed a window. My mom had been out getting us Happy Meals while this whole ordeal went on, so she was more than a little shocked when she arrived home.
Please leave your story down below in the comments. I would absolutely love to make a video about them in the future. And also don't forget to like and subscribe. And until next time, peace.